This is the worst horror movie ever made, and I know this scene doesn't make any sense to you right now, but don't worry, because I've seen the movie and it still doesn't make sense to me. All I know is I couldn't start this video the same way they started the movie, or else literally nobody would watch it. Because the movie opens with a minute and a half of scrolling text attempting to explain what the movie is about. Because the movie is so confusing that test audiences didn't even know what it was about after they watched it, that they had to go back and add this in.
It doesn't make any sense.
So I'm just gonna have to do my best and hold your hand and walk through this nightmare with you.
Come with me if you want to live.
As soon as we learn about the Upcani people and the gold mine and 713 and just everything else, we cut to some kid running through the woods away from what looks like police. And then it quickly cuts over to a nun talking to a scientist who is trying to convince her that it's okay that he's experimenting on the orphans in her orphanage. But she feels bad, of course, because they're like her orphans.
Anyway.
But apparently one of the kids has run away, which was the kid that we saw at the beginning, who is now hiding in some kind of transformer or an electrical box. Even being an electrician, I have no idea what this is supposed to be, but it's got electricity in it. That's all we need to know. And then we cut to the cops showing up again and talking to the nun, and of course she's playing it off like, I don't know, I went to look for the orphans and they're just not there. Who knows where they went? We don't know either, because the only orphan that we've seen and that we're going to see is this one, who is looking at alien dogs of some kind. And then it just cuts to Christian Slater waking up on an airplane next to the most annoying kid that you could ever sit by.
My mommy says that cheese gives you nightmares.
I guess since he is annoying, he decides to traumatize him. Then the movie just cuts to an old guy on a boat who decides to take a phone call and tells them that they need to kill Edward Carnaby, which is the character that Christian Slater is playing in this movie. But Slater sounds way better to me than Carnaby, so I'm gonna call him Slater for the rest of this. Slater walks up to a taxi, gets in, and they start going, and he talks about his job and gives this vague explanation of what that means.
I hunt and track down the strange and unusual.
Then quickly tells him that we're being followed by somebody, and as the cool taxi driver that he is, he says,
You want me to lose him?
and then we get this mediocre chase scene. And I just don't understand why you would follow somebody in the first place if you're trying to be sneaky in a yellow taxi, the vehicle that is made to stand out for people to see. The crazy guy ends up catching up with them, slams into him, and I'm assuming that Discount Rupert Grint dies and Slater is able to jump out of the way, but now Crazy Man is just gone. Crazy guy is actually Ed Anders, who has worked on a ton of huge movies doing stunts and being a stunt coordinator, so it's kind of crazy they got him for this, but they did waste $20 million on it. But Ed decides to show off his stunt skills and his movie superpowers and does a sneak attack. And they fight and they run and they fight. And Ed shows that he's the bad guy by kicking down a door and pushing an old man. And then they're fighting again, and Ed tries to grab this thing out of Slater's pocket, which is apparently important for the movie. Slater shows his own superpowers by somehow jumping and kicking off of the ground and gets his little artifact thing back and takes off running again, and then just steals a cop's gun and proceeds to shoot Ed from super far away. But Ed is unfazed, so Slater runs a little bit farther and then does this. Makes me wonder where the first bullet went. It didn't just evaporate or disappear because it went through ice. But either way, it hits Ed in the chest, and he is still unfazed and runs over and grabs Slater and is fixing to, I guess, roll him into a barrel of dead fish. Slater somehow gets the upper hand and throws Ed over the top of him, where he lands on a dead fish hook spear thing. What a crazy way to start off, because it's still just all downhill from here. And then we have Tara Reid at a museum, who is actually playing Aileen, how do you say her name?
This is Aileen Cedric.
Dumb. Aline. I think I'm gonna call her Aline. We get this explanation of who Aline is.
She's the assistant curator.
And who the Upcani people are.
It's an ancient Native American civilization.
Just a whole exposition dump from a security guard of all people.
Let's move it along.
All the way down to the fact that Aline's boyfriend has been missing for months on end now.
Her boyfriend's been missing for the last 3 months.
Like, who is this guy, and why does he think he has to tell everybody everything that he knows?
I shouldn't have said that.
Because we actually need him to figure out that the old man on the boat is the Dr. Hudgens that they were talking about from the museum. And on that that boat, they've found some kind of big chest, which he tries to explain what it is, but we're just going to move on because it doesn't matter. Just like this scene in an alleyway with Slater that makes it seem like he's being followed, but there's literally nothing. And he just goes into his apartment. He pulls out this weird-looking jewel thing that Ed earlier trying to steal from him. And probably the most important thing that actually happens is he checks his voicemail.
John here. It's the nightmares. They've started again. I need to know if it's just me.
But he doesn't even care about that, so why should we? Because right now, Dr. Hudgens is on this boat with this chest, which is made out of solid gold. Apparently that doesn't matter because Slater is still looking at this weird jewel thing and is using his computer to computerize it. But that's too boring because there's gold. And the guys on the boat decide that they're gonna lock up Dr. Hudgens and take the gold for themselves. Just as they open it, it just cuts back to Slater again, where the weird jewel thing starts to glow and he gets a headache. And if it wasn't confusing enough, now we're adding in extra people that are also just waking up in the middle of the night and leaving their houses. And then we see Dr. Hudgens locked inside of this room where I guess he's safe because there's a bunch of stuff going on outside. But that's too much out of our budget, so we just go back to the people and them walking down the street. And once everything is calmed down on the boat, we get one of the funniest things because the captions literally say that there's no gunfire or screaming. Like, these are captions. These are to tell me what sounds are on screen, not what sounds aren't on screen. Then Dr. Hudgens steps out of the room and it's a total massacre. It seems like everybody on the boat has been killed by something. And looking into this chest that Dr. Hudgens has never seen before in his life, he knows exactly where the secret lever is, pulls it, and grabs something else out of the bottom of it and runs away. If you're like me, you have a lot of questions already with all of the random people that are involved in this movie, but don't worry, there's more. Because now we just have two random guys that are talking about paranormal readings being over 50. And luckily, some text on screen tells us that this is Bureau 713, which we were told about in the opening credits of the movie. The commander, played by Stephen Dorff, and we don't know his name until much later in the movie.
Electromagnetics off the scale, Commander.
But what we do know is that they have some accurate readings of some electromagnetics, and it's bad. Their faces tell me that it must be bad, because I have no idea what that means. And then for some reason, back at the museum, they have to show us a line getting a call from Dr. Hudgens. And even in my own notes, it says dumb. Finally, we get to spend some actual time with the main character, where he is still on the floor and having, I guess, flashbacks of his childhood. And he wakes up to a phone call from the lady of one of the people that we saw get up and leave their house, which this is Linda, who is actually married to John.
It's John here.
That he just didn't care about. But now we're supposed to care about him and his family, I guess. And then Slater leaves and he drives and talks about the Abkhani or whatever.
According to Abkhani legend.
And he says,
that would explain the man who tried to kill me this morning.
Which makes me question a lot of stuff, because if everything has been going in order, this should be the next day whenever he wakes up. So it would be the previous day when he was attacked. And I know that sounds trivial, but because I had to figure out where everything happens, because they don't tell you, and I had to figure out when everything happens, because they don't tell you, this kind of stuff just made it way more confusing. Because even the movie doesn't know. And then Slater meets with Linda, and we find out that him and John have known each other since they were kids, and he makes a promise to her that he will find him.
I'll find John.
And I mean, I know what happens, and I mean, technically he carries through with that promise. And then Slater calls the best character in the movie, whose name is Fish, and he still works for 713. And
Kill me if they find out. Then let me check.
And the other person that he goes to get some information on John is actually the same nun from the beginning of the movie, who is now older, and he asks for all the info, not just on John, but all the other orphans, because he wants to get back in contact with all of them. And then Slater tells us some boring stuff about how he was recruited to 713 whenever he was 20.
I was recruited into Bureau 713 when I was 20.
But every time he found like an Abkhani artifact, he got shut down.
Every time I uncovered a new Abkhani artifact, it immediately got classified.
And so he left 713. But he never tells us why he's looking for Abkhani artifacts or anything. We're supposed to assume it's important. And then after leaving the orphanage, Slater goes and meets with Fish and gets some info on not just John, but all of the other orphans. And apparently all of them have gone missing except for Slater, which is, of course, weird, but he is the main character and He's got a main character. Later on that day, he actually goes to the museum to see a line. Yes, I'm gonna keep calling her that. And it turns out that he is the missing boyfriend.
I thought you were dead.
And to make her not so upset with him, he shows her the jewel thing, and she scans and computerizes it. And of course, the jewel thing is
It's Connie.
whatever that means. But before they can actually talk about the pieces that are all together now, all of the lights start dimming up and down. They think something's clearly wrong, so they get up to go and just walk around the museum. Even the security guard is just walking around the museum like he's expecting to find something. But instead, he gets found by this weird alien thing. Don't you get your hopes up. It's still all downhill from here. Later in a line, they find the security guard laying on the ground. They go, Rob. They just don't sound concerned at all about this guy that they knew, that they just found dead. And they end up hiding in this room, and we see, of course, the little alien guy chasing after them. And the room that they picked to hide in has a window, so you can look, of course, in and out because it's a window. And you would figure that they would hide to where you couldn't be seen through the window. But no, Slater just stands where you clearly can see him from the hallway. Of course, the alien thing tries to attack. Slater shoots at it a couple times and it runs away. And then we get a bunch of guys jumping through a window in the ceiling of the museum with guns, and it turns out that it's 713. They shoot at, and I'm assuming miss, the monster thing, because it just runs off and disappears, and whenever they scan it, it's no longer anywhere nearby.
Scanner's clear?
Scanner's clear.
And guess who's here? The commander guy. And he actually knows Slater.
Carby.
Hey, Bart, good to see you too.
But Slater, being an idiot, decides that he's going to just demand information from a secret government organization.
I want to know what 713 knows.
Burke says, no, you're not a part of 713. You don't get any information.
That information's classified. Thank you. I don't need your help.
And then Burke tells somebody to get Slater out of there, and Slater says that he asked nicely.
I asked very nicely.
And just attacks Burke. And I just don't understand, because Slater's supposed to be the main character. Like, he's supposed to be likable. And so far, I don't like him at all. He clearly doesn't care about his friends. He leaves his girlfriend for months on end. Then, of course, here, he just comes off as mean and unlikable. And, like, I would guess that they're going for kind of the loose cannon kind of thing with him. But they're not. I've seen this movie. That's not what they're going for. Turns out that Slater was actually attacking Burke to lift his security badge thing, and then he meets with the line outside, and she says that she's actually going to go back inside to get her stuff from her office.
I have to get my stuff.
No, wait, that was the lie that she told whenever she goes back inside. She actually is going back in to study artifacts.
I need to study those artifacts.
But if you'll remember, just moments ago, there was a weird alien creature that attacked them in the museum. And now 713 is here and has locked down the building.
This place is locked down. No one gets in here.
And somehow they still just let her go to her office.
You see anything, you let me know immediately.
713 sucks. And I can say that with confidence because Slater has now shown up at the 713 headquarters to talk to Fish. And then we actually get some information about the guy that attacked Slater in the beginning of the movie, and it turns out that he is ex-713 who went missing 20 years ago. But the most important thing is that he has this weird centipede, like, in his spine.
What?
And even after Fish removes it from his spine, the scanner apparently is still going off for whatever reason, and he holds it up to Slater. Yes, Fish is still the best part of this movie. And Hudgens is probably the worst part of this movie, and he just showed up to the locked down museum to talk to a line.
This place is locked down. No one gets in here.
And says that he would like to actually study all of these artifacts and that he's going to. It's not a question. And luckily the 713 soldier comes walking back in and she breaks everything up. Then we cut back over to Fish and Slater talking about the weird centipede thing that he has in his spine. And he just randomly brings up that he was electrocuted as a kid.
I was electrocuted when I was a kid. I must have killed it.
First off, two things. One, why did we not see that? That would have been a pretty important part to put into the movie. And second off, to be electrocuted is to be killed by electric shock. I know this because once more, I am a literal master electrician. I have met people, however, that have been electrocuted and then brought back because the shock restarted their heart. Maybe that happened to him, or maybe the writer is just an idiot. I think you know which one I'm going to lean towards. To further back up my point that not only the writer is an idiot, but everybody involved in this movie is an idiot, the next scene, we see Hudgens walking into his office. There seems to be a monster alien creature thing in a cage, and he gets a big syringe, he sticks it, he draws it out, I guess he gets its blood, and then like a junkie, he shoots himself up with it. This is so stupid. This movie sucks. The time span of what is happening in this movie, it seems like he didn't walk very far. So I'm assuming that he just walked to his office. But if that happened, 713 should have scanned that there was this alien thing in the museum.
Scanner's clear.
So I don't really know where he is, but I guess it doesn't matter. All that matters is what we see, and that's that he is a monster blood junkie. Finally, Fish is the one that actually tells us that they call them
Xenos.
Catchy.
and that is way too close to xenomorph, so I'm gonna call them Zeros. I think you know why. Apparently the Zeros have been around for the last 2 years and they've been 713's biggest priority. Where are they coming from? How are they tied to the Abkhani? How are they tied to these weird artifacts? And even if I were to explain to you the lore behind the movie, it still wouldn't make sense. So there's no point. The biggest thing that you need to know is what Fish says. They have the ability to mess with electric fields, that certain elements will mess with their ability to mess with electrical fields.
Osmium, iridium, platinum, and gold.
But don't worry, flashlights still work around them. Fish gives a reason for this, but it doesn't matter. And that sunlight can kill them.
Sunlight is lethal in large doses.
And so they've made these sunlight bullets,
Cuts right through.
which are bullets coated in photon accelerated luminescent resin. Whatever that means.
I'm gonna need a lot of these.
And just after this, we see Slater coming into his apartment at daytime, where he has a big chest. I'm assuming that it has all of the sunlight bullets and some extra guns in it. And then he decides that he needs a nap. Since he's not talking to anybody in this scene, there is a voiceover that's going on where he's saying that the Abkhani, these monsters, and the missing orphans, he believes are all connected.
Can't be a coincidence.
But don't think about any of that. Just think on this completely random scene where Miles talks to Antonio, whoever this guy is, asking for some kind of list. It's the random stupid scenes like this that are in the movie that just make it that much worse. Because the only thing that we needed to know from any of this is that Miles here is getting Fish and telling him to go talk to Burke. And since it's still daytime, they cut back over to a line making it to Slater's apartment where she has the box of the Abkhani artifacts and sits down to computer them again. Then it's back over to Burke and Fish where they talk, and for some reason Fish has to walk around Burke before he can speak to him. Apparently Burke is mad at Fish because he's been talking to Slater and he makes it this big thing about there being sides and he's having to figure out which side Fish is on and even threatens to fire him. And after this flex of power, Fish actually delivers what is probably the best line in the entire movie.
What is it you need from me?
Burke just asks for all of the intel that he has on Slater since he's the one that has been talking to Slater. Dumb. We get some more time with Fish whenever he goes home and somebody rings his doorbell and his wife goes to check the door. Some weird sounds happen. He gets up to go and find his wife, and of course, everything is really eerie. Hudgens is there. And then we have the worst character in the movie choking the best character in the movie, and then putting some weird worm thing down Fish's throat, and then his eyes turn white. Go with us. Told you it's all downhill from here. So now it's nighttime back over at Slater's apartment, where Aline and Slater are talking about the Abkhani artifacts, and apparently they're able to do something with location and the stars.
To pinpoint a geographical location.
And then she's surprised that they have something to do with location.
Edward, this is correct. I think the computer can pinpoint location.
I guess it doesn't matter because it does not get brought back up in the movie. Then all of the lamps in the apartment start to flicker and he grabs a gun, gives it to her, runs over and grabs another gun. They sort of stumble around. John shows up. John chokes him a little bit. He shoots him. which sucks, but at the same time, he did fulfill his promise to Linda that he would find John.
I just killed John.
I had no choice.
And then there's some other people running around inside of Slater's apartment that they start to shoot at until one of the Zeros shows up, and then they're running away. The only two things that I'm thinking during this entire time is, who has this many lamps in their house? And the other thing is, how big is this apartment? Here's a strobe warning for anybody that's sensitive because it's fixing to get crazy. You can skip over to this time code. But then we get the weirdest thing. It's like a metal music video with guns, where they're shooting at a ton of these Zeros, so much so that 713 comes crashing through another window. They're shooting at them too. But then it looks like all of the Zeros just run away, because this is what it looks like whenever one dies from the sunlight bullets. During this entire thing, that doesn't happen again. So it makes me wonder if 713 is actually even using the sunlight bullets, or if they're just using regular bullets. But I guess it doesn't matter, because Burke shows up where he's just mad at Slater for being in Slater's own apartment. And Slater tells us the #1 rule of 713.
First rule they teach at 713, huh? Trust your instincts, right?
Before Burke is able to make up his mind on whether or not to take them in, somebody makes a weird noise and literally everybody just starts shooting. That allows them to actually run away. Burke looks back, for some reason surprised. I have no idea why he's surprised, because these lamps are literally everywhere. Then they're actually fighting the orphans, is what it turns out that it is. And Slater saves Burke, and now they're gonna be homies for the rest of the movie. It's dumb. So for the next while, it's just these people fighting the monster orphans. And then the movie will just randomly have two characters that we don't know go off and do something. And it makes you think that they're important or something crazy is going to happen, and then it just doesn't return to them. Because they're not important, they're extras, and it doesn't matter. Just like the rest of this movie. But I had to suffer through it like 8 times, and so now you're gonna suffer through it at least this once. So now that they've killed all of the monster orphans, yeah, they just killed them dead instead of trying to capture them and help them out or remove the thing. They just kill them all. Apparently orphans don't matter in this movie. Hear the radio coming through from headquarters at 713 saying there's a big spike in signals going on over at some abandoned gold mine.
All available agents are being rerouted to an abandoned gold mine in your sector.
And since Slater and Burke are now buddies again, they all load up into a helicopter and fly over there. We get some explanation about why the gold mine has been shut down for like 20-something years, and we get a little hint that it's close by where Slater actually grew up.
Grew up in that area. Why are we going there?
The only real information that we get out of any of this is 713 for some reason came in and investigated.
The agents in charge of the investigation were Dr. Lionel Hudgens and James Pinkerton.
That's it. It just cuts off. Like, we're supposed to connect all of the pieces ourselves. But I will point out this one cool thing is that it's actual helicopters that they land in. And so they all get out and they're headed towards the gold mine. And then we have the second best character in the movie, Turner, here, who is working on the generator. Even though, if you were paying attention, you would see that some of the lights outside were already on and working. Oh no, you mean to tell me they made a mistake in this movie? Yeah, later gets, I guess, this weird feeling and just starts to walk away from everybody else over towards the gold mine, where he just vaguely says, that's where we need to go.
This is where we need to go.
And then he says one of the stupidest lines in this movie.
They're all coming here for a reason. Until we know what that is, we're not going to be able to stop them.
You can absolutely stop them. Set up and just shoot them with the sunlight bullets. It clearly didn't take you very much. It took like 4 shots. But instead of listening to me, everybody decides to listen to him, because once more, he is the main character. And so they all head into the mine. And that's not good, because everybody else that is outside is literally an extra, and they're spending time with a guy that has maybe 2 minutes screen time. And I'll let you guess what that means for all of their fates. So we see them complaining that the generator's not up and they really need those lights, even though it's really bright just everywhere. Inside the mine with our main team, they're all just walking. And yes, they do have a couple side soldiers with them as well. And luckily, Turner finally gets the generator up and running and is able to turn all of the lights on for people to set up the rest of the way. As for our main team, they come to what seems to be kind of the end of the mine corridor, and they're not really sure where to go. And for no reason at all, this guy decides to get down on the ground and do this on the floor. And then he falls to his death.
I think I found some.
Before they can actually climb down, we cut back to the outside where two extras are talking about how there's still 4 more hours until sunrise. And then we see Hudgens just standing there, apparently controlling the Zeros and sending them to kill 713. And then it cuts back to Turner, who's closing up everything on the generator, and then Fish is there. Fish grabs him, pulls the pin on the grenade, and blows both of the best characters in this movie to smithereens, along with the generator. So I think you know what happens next is all of the Zeros show up and completely massacre all of the extras. I guess they're not using the sunlight bullets. I don't know, but they don't kill any of them. Now back to our main team, who's actually climbing down the hold so that way they can get the body of their fallen comrade. And somehow a line slips and Slater can grab her. Logically doesn't make any sense, but he saves her. But I guess don't think about that, as well as don't think about what happens here whenever they all make it down there and the one side soldier gets hit in the leg by something and falls down like she's dying. Just know that for some reason her leg is now hurt. The movie, I guess, is also trying to confuse us because it keeps showing us the extras over and over again, like we're supposed to actually care about any of them. And I mean, it should be pretty clear what is going to happen to literally all of them whenever 1 Zero takes out both helicopters with one jump, completely by itself. And it's after that that they kind of realize we need to fall back because we're all going to die. Speaking of die, there's actually this weird sandworm thing that pops up next to our side character soldier who has the hurt leg, and literally nobody does anything about it, and it looks around at all of them and then bites her. Why nobody shot or why nobody reacted? I don't know. I guess they gotta kill her off somehow. But after it goes away, some more of them come out. They fight all of those off and keep everybody else from dying. And then I guess it has venom or something. We are not told, but then she ends up dying. At least I think she dies. We do see her try to get up off of the ground. I guess because she thought the scene was over. I'm gonna run through the next few scenes because they literally cut back and forth. It's nauseating. So up top, we see some random guy die, and then we see Miles and this other chick. They're talking for a second. He tells her that they need to find higher ground. He's gonna stay where he is. Like this is some kind of Scooby-Doo adventure and they have to split up. So she leaves, he stays where she's at, and he realizes that he's probably a side character. And then down below, the main team finds some random brick wall that they need to blow up. And back up top, Miles tries to reassure himself that he's more than an extra whenever he kills one of the Zeros. There's only 2 of them that die in this movie, and this guy killed one of them. Surely he must be important. And back down below, we have the main team actually putting the bomb on there and blowing up the wall. And back up top, we have Miles going to look for Finstra after they split up for some reason, and he goes up the weirdest looking stairs. Back down below, we have the main team who are just walking somewhere. And once more back up top, we have Miles walking up, finding Finstra dead on the ground, and then 2 of the Zeros attack him and kill him. Why did we spend all of this time with any of these characters when they just ended up dying anyway? What a waste! So now with our main team being the only ones left, we have 4 of them walking into what seems to be some sort of lab. Whenever Burke actually walks over and he sees Slater's name on a nameplate, calls him over, and then they quickly all realize that 713 were the ones that implanted everybody with the weird bug creatures and caused all of this in the first place.
We've been trying to stop something they created the whole time.
I still wonder how in the world Slater has one of these bugs in him in the first place. Whenever he ran away at the beginning of the movie, like it made it sound like he got away before he was implanted with the bug. It just doesn't make any sense, and even Burke agrees.
It doesn't make any sense.
And then our last side character soldier over here sees a switch on the wall where he grabs it and pulls it down, and a door opens up, and they all go, oh wow, an Obconnie door. I just have one question, because this is a literal electrical disconnect switch. Is there electricity down here? Because they're way underground at the end of a gold mine, and we can see perfectly fine. But that's not the question to think about. The question to think about is all of these Upconnie pieces that we've been carrying around because we said they were important at the beginning of the movie, now all fit together to make a key to this door that is hidden underneath ground, where all of these pieces have been scattered across the entire world and have now been brought back together to open this door that has been locked for over 10,000 years. Should we open it, yes or no?
Trust the uncanny.
This is whenever the side character soldier number 3 gets shot in the back of the head. And it's because Dr. Hudgens is here, and he's very serious about them giving him that key. See how serious he is? And so instead of trying to fight him, they lay down their guns, and then Hudgens goes on about how Slater has caused all of these problems in his life. Doesn't make any sense, but he's just a crazy old man with a gun. That's all you need to know. He demands the key because, once more, he is a crazy old man with a gun. Now get over there! So he gets the key. He adds one more piece to it that they didn't know that they needed or that even existed. He opens the door. And just as he does open the door, he gets stabbed whenever Burke throws his knife across the room, perfectly placed into Hudgens' heart. Hudgens falls over dead, and the door opens up to reveal millions and millions of zeros. I don't know if this is just underground somewhere or if this is actually in a different dimension. None of that's ever explained. All they know is they need to get the door shut. Instead of trying to grab the door and pull it down and shut it, what do they decide to do? They're just gonna blow it up. So Burke throws down his bag full of all of the explosives that they have. They shut the door and they take off running. And then once more we see that all of the extras up top are dead. And then it shows 713 headquarters, where they all look up because of barking. What? The biggest thing that you need to know is that it's still dark outside. So our main team takes off running. They find a ladder. Hopefully they'll be able to take it, end up outside somewhere. Burke realizes that the remote is actually not working. So in a hero move, he actually runs back and leaves Slater in a line to go up the ladder.
I'm going back.
Burke, come on!
He shoots at the Zeros, who for some reason still haven't made it to the door. He grabs all of the explosives, and for some reason, he sets the bomb to 5 seconds and takes off running. And then it cuts to Slater shooting through some sort of lock on a metal door, but whenever we see the lock on the outside, it's daylight. Excuse me? And then Burke jumps and he lands on the ground. This huge explosion happens just as Slater and Align are actually making their way out of the door. Huge fireball comes up, and surely Burke is dead, right? Nope, doesn't appear that he's dead because he actually coughs a little bit and rolls over. But he might as well be dead because that's the last time we see him in this movie. Because I guess the only ones that are still important are Slater and Align, who are outside in the daytime next to his old orphanage, where they then go inside and actually find the nun that raised him, and she has offed herself because I guess she feels bad for everything that has happened. And in the final scene of this movie, we see the cityscape again, and it's completely empty. And with some text on the screen, the movie actually tells us that the city has been evacuated and is now 8:45 a.m. And I still have questions because there's like a literal stroller that's just left out here, and there's cars in the middle of the street. Like people heard it on the radio saying they need to evacuate, stopped, parked their car, flung the door open, and took off running out of the city. That's the stupidest thing. We even see the 713 headquarters is now abandoned, and I wonder, what? Weren't they the ones that called for the evacuation of the city? Did they also just up and leave? And then we get some voiceover from Slater, who talks about the Upconnie people again, saying that because they messed with dark forces, they were wiped off the face of the earth.
Looks like it's happening all over again.
Does that mean that the people were evacuated out of the city, or they were wiped off the face of the earth? It can't be both. That doesn't make any sense. But you want to know what really doesn't make any sense? Is directly after this, it shows us some more of the cityscape. Then we hear some Zero sounds again, where apparently one of them runs up and attacks Slater and Align in the middle of the street, in broad daylight.
Sunlight is lethal in large doses.
And then we get credits. And that's the movie, directed by Uwe Boll, who's also created some more of the worst horror movies ever put out there, based on an Atari video game by the same name, which they're actually recreating this year on October 25th with David Harbour. And I just hope that the game is way better than whatever this was. You want to know the worst part about all of this? Is even though I've seen it so many times, I cannot easily tell you what it was about. Like, I can't sum it up any better than just explaining the entire thing. I guess if I had to try. So after attempting to explain this movie, watching it back now while editing, I realized that it makes zero sense still. So I'm just gonna spare you the confusion and assume that there's no easy way to sum up this movie. All right, thanks, love you, bye. If I have to give this movie a rating, it's gonna be a 0 out of 10. This is literally the worst rated big budget horror film of all time. It does not get any worse than this. I'm just glad that I never have to think or talk about this movie again because, I mean, it's not like the story goes any farther than this. I know that there's a lot of other bad horror movies out there, and if you have any that you want me to cover just like this one, let me know down in the comments. Here's the last movie that I actually covered. I thank you for watching, and if you haven't, hit subscribe because I've got a lot more videos that are going to be coming out soon. Have an extra blessed day, and I'll see y'all in the next one.